Hello and welcome. Hi, Danait. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice and warm. I bet it's warm where you are today as well.
Yes, it is. I am so excited and so happy. Literally, we take any opportunity once it gets warm up here to live. We basically live outside at that point. So that's basically what's happening.
For our listeners who don't know, you're based in New York State and
Yes.
I'm based in Ontario. I'd love to know where our listeners are tuning in from that are here for the replay or who start to pop in live. So, as we get started here, I first want to say a huge thank you to our sponsor, Offeringtree, which is really cool because I feel like tonight, I feel like I got to know you kind of both through Amanda McKinney and Offeringtree. For our listeners who don't know, Offeringtree is an amazing platform for yoga teachers. If you're looking at how can I teach yoga online and integrate with Zoom or host my videos online or have a website up and running really quickly, I highly suggest checking out Offeringtree. And I have a coupon code for you as well. It's offeringtree.com/Shannon. Do you have anything to say tonight? Because I feel like you helped Offeringtree with their brand messaging.
Yeah, I did. And I love Offeringtree. I think that they have such a great platform, especially for when you're not really a techie person and you're like, I know I need to go online, but I don't know how to do that. And I'm like kind of freaking out about it. It's so easy. When we were working together, I was like, well, I think you guys should show me like how this works a little bit. And they were showing me and I was like, wait, that's all you have to do. Like, yeah, that's all you have to do to start a website. And I was like, okay, yeah, because that took me like 17,000 hours to put my website together. So I'm like, that's great. So yes, it is such a great platform for yoga teachers who are just trying to get things online and put their classes on Zoom. Like you said, all of those things, and they make it so easy. And they're the nicest people, literally the nicest people.
They are. They're a great company. I'm really impressed with their work and how they're showing up to serve yoga teachers. Yeah, very
Mhm.
cool. So before we dive right into talking about why it's important to talk about problems as yoga teachers and why this is even part of our business, tell our yoga teachers who you are and what is the work that you do.
Yeah, so I'm Danait Berhe and I run the Asmara Agency, which is a brand and marketing agency. And we help entrepreneurs to really get their message figured out. We do a lot of branding work, which is like the design stuff, what everybody knows as branding, like your logo and things like that. But before we ever even get there, we really help entrepreneurs figure out their messaging, their positioning, who they are, who they're trying to talk to, and what is the problem that they are uniquely solving in the world. And yeah, I love getting to do that. It's so fun getting to meld someone's unique perspective with what they see that they can make an impact and a difference in, and bring those two things together into a clear and cohesive message. So that is what I do. I live in upstate New York, not close to New York City, in Buffalo, and it gets very cold here. And so that is why I get so excited when it gets so nice and warm.
We're not that far away. I feel like when things open up and it's safe to travel, we've already been chatting about having a visit. So it would be great to get together. Also, it's
Yeah,
warm here today, but not most of the year.
I feel that.
For those of you who are here live, pop a hello in the comments. Tell us what are some of your questions around what problem your yoga students are having and your messaging or website questions. Tonight's here to answer questions. I'm going to start to dig into this because I'm really excited. I feel like tonight you have so much, like this huge wealth of knowledge in this. And so I'm excited that I get to pick your brain here today and we'll really talk about how this applies to our yoga teachers. So first of all, I want to say that when you put your we have a form that we send out. I was like reading it, like usually the questions are not about problem solving. So do you want to tell me what are the questions that you hear from people when they go to create their website or put their message out there in some way? What are they asking you, and how does it relate back to the problem?
Yeah. So a lot of times people, like you said, aren't really sure that the talking about the problem is the thing that they should be doing. Usually they'll say like, "Oh, I'm putting things out there, but no one's really buying my thing, and I don't know if I'm like posting the right amount of times on social media." Or they'll ask, you know, what should I be pricing my offer? Like, I don't know, should it be a high price thing or a low price thing? They'll ask, they'll really talk about the messaging, like how am I saying the right things? Am I am I talking about the things that I'm supposed to be talking about? And a lot of times, all of those things could be answered by really figuring out what the problem is, because pricing is always solved by figuring out the problem and then how big is the problem to your audience and what is it worth to them to pay to have that problem solved. If it's something really small, like if we if we need, a I don't know, a thing for the sink. That's the easiest example I could think of because we just bought something for the sink the other day. So that food doesn't go down the drain. I'm not really willing to pay $5,000 to have that solved. But when I'm at the store and I'm like, "Oh yeah, this thing is 4.99. Yes, that is." And like in my mind, I'm like, that's valuable enough for the problem that it's causing me. So pricing can be solved by determining what is the problem we're solving, and then how big of a problem is it for someone to pay, and what are they willing to pay for that. Messaging can be solved by figuring out, like, if you're struggling with, oh well, I don't know, like, I don't have any content ideas, I don't really know what to talk about, I don't know what to post on Instagram or on my Facebook or whatever the case may be. If you understand the problem that you're solving for people, you'll really begin to understand what things do they need to know for them to be able to see that I am at the solution to that problem. And so the content ideas start to really roll in once you figure that out, because you're like, oh, this person is struggling with back pain. What questions would they have around that? Let me figure that out. And then the content ideas come. So a lot of times people will come and they'll ask me these like questions that are kind of on the surface level of things. And then once we dig in, it's really, okay, you haven't figured out the problem you're solving. And once we can figure that out, that's when all of these pieces can kind of come together pretty seamlessly sometimes.
This is so good. And I want to say that yoga teachers, and I don't know, maybe it's all entrepreneurs, but working with yoga teachers, I see that yoga teachers don't want to focus on the problem. Like, let's say the problem that someone is dealing with is like high anxiety or stress. And I get that when someone comes to your website, you want to convey calm and, um, the opposite of stress and anxiety. It's not like you want them to get on there and then all they see is this triggering, image of someone who's dealing with stress and anxiety. So how do you address that? How do you what about when we don't want to focus on the problem?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so there's a couple pieces to that. First piece is that a lot of marketing that we've been taught, especially writing like the words for our website and things like that, we have been taught to agitate the problem. That's like one of the formulas in copywriting, is to agitate the problem and really get someone to feel that problem so that they're like, "Ooh, okay, I need to solve this right away." I don't agree with that. I believe that there is an empathetic approach to being able to solve problems without necessarily poking at the problem. So we still want to talk about the problem, and we want to talk about the problem from the perspective of, this is what you're experiencing, this is how I can help you, and kind of focus on the desire that they have to be rid of this back pain, to not feel this anxiety every day, in their day to day or in their work or whatever the case may be. But in order to do that, a lot of times when we don't talk about the problem, what we're doing is we're creating a sales situation where we feel salesy and pushy and like we're convincing people. That's what you're setting yourself up for when you don't talk about the problem openly. When you don't do that, what you set yourself up for is this person has not self identified as someone who needs this solution. They're not someone who's saying, that sounds like me. I think that this is the solution for me. And so you're getting into a situation where that's where I get a lot of questions around. Well, how do you make sales not feel so icky? Like, I feel so, I don't like selling. I don't like getting on sales calls. It makes me really anxious. And I feel like I'm trying to convince people. And I've never felt that way. And the reason is because I let people self identify before they ever get to come on a call with me. I get them to a point where they're saying, yeah, I think this might be the thing I need. I just need to talk to you, ask a few extra questions, really make sure that this is for me. And you want to get people to that point. You don't need to pick at the problem. You don't need to poke at it. You don't need to agitate it to get people to that point. All you need to do, though, is you need to tell people, hey, this is the person that I solved this problem for. Because once you do that, the person can then self identify and say, oh, yeah, that does sound like a lot like me. That does sound like a lot of the things that I'm experiencing. And when you get someone there, then selling becomes so easy because they're coming to you. You're not convincing, you're not pushing, you're not saying, like, you need my class, you need to get in here so that I can help you do XYZ. They're coming to you because they're saying, it sounds like you help people with anxiety. And I've been experiencing a lot of the things you've been talking about in some of your content. And I really like your approach. It sounds like your approach does XYZ. Is that correct? How can it help me? And now you're just getting to answer questions and helping someone figure out if this is the right fit for them. I kind of think about it like if you go into a store looking for a very specific thing and you're like, hey, I need help with finding a computer. They didn't push and drag you into the store. You figured out that you need a computer because you didn't have a computer and you're like, "Hey, I think this is a problem I'm experiencing. Where do they sell computers?" Then you look and you find, "Oh, hey, this store has computers." You go in and you tell them, "I need a computer." And now they're going to ask you questions. "Okay, what kind of computer? What do you do for work? How much time are you usually on your computer every day?" Now they're just helping you figure out. No one is like pushing you to you've already said, I need this thing. I'm willing to pay to have this problem solved. I'm just trying to figure out, is this the right thing? Is this class for me or is this class for me? Is this thing for me or that thing for me? And that's where we want to get people. When we don't talk about the problem, we create a situation in which now we're pushing people because we're just talking about this dream of no anxiety, everything is going to be really nice and calm. And this person is like, do I need that? I don't know. Like, am is that for me? I'm not really sure. And then if you haven't told them, well, yes, you might need it if you're experiencing these things, how would they ever know? And now you're just pushing them to buy something and you're feeling frustrated because you're like, why is no one buying my thing? I think it's great and I'm putting it out there. And other people are confused because they're like, yeah, that sounds nice, but like, why would I pay for that? There has to be a problem attached for someone to be willing to pay because money is an exchange of value, right? Like you're giving them something in return for something. They're getting a solution to a problem in exchange for money. And when you don't point that out, it makes it really hard to show someone why they should ever give you money in the first place for what it is that you're doing. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I'm so curious to hear from our connected yoga teachers in the comments about, like, what do you think if you had a guess in your yoga business, what do you think the problem is that you're solving? And I love how you said tonight that this is really how we get people to see, "Oh, yeah, that's me. This is the solution that I've been looking for," and we can't just focus on like, one thing that I often hear in the yoga world is, just try yoga. It's life-changing. Like, it will bring you calm and peace, and let's just teach yoga and market yoga. And there is a reluctance to focus on that problem. So I'm glad you highlighted the reason for it. Like, if we're having back pain, we will quickly type up like yoga to relieve back pain, even though some of the solutions that come up might not actually be helpful for us. So, um, yeah, this is a big topic in the yoga world because I know yoga teachers who focus in and help people with their back pain and look at an article online and they're like, I don't understand how this article is relative to back pain. So
Yeah.
how do we do this in a really um authentic way? Like, how do we how do we get the message out there beyond the people who seem to be doing more of that poking or be using the problem more? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So what you don't want to do when you're talking about the problem someone is experiencing is really putting them in this position where, because when you poke at a problem, what you're doing essentially is you are getting someone to be emotionally triggered. And when someone's emotionally triggered, they purchase based off of that impulse. And we don't want to create that environment where we are getting someone to feel like, oh, I need the thing, like I'm not going to be okay without it. And when we create that sort of like emotional distress, the person isn't purchasing because they understand that this is the solution, this is the problem I have, this is the solution that's available to me, and I'm consciously making this decision to purchase that thing. They're buying because you've poked at this problem enough that you've created this emotional distress, and now we're just impulse buying at this point. If you've ever seen, those things where there's a sales page, it's telling you all the things that are wrong, how, you're not going to be successful without getting XYZ thing. And they paint a picture of like what could go possibly wrong ever if you never solve this problem, right? Now you're like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize it could get that bad. And now you're like, I need to buy this thing right now. Otherwise, like my business is going to devolve into nothingness. And then you're just stress buying at this point, right? That's not what we want to do. What we want to do when we call out the problem is we're coming from a place of empathy. We're trying to show our audience that, like, hey, I see you, I understand you. There's nothing wrong with pointing out, like, it's kind of like if your friend is crying, you wouldn't just ignore it, right? You would say, hey, I see you're crying and I really want to know what's going on. Like, how can I help you? That's what we're doing when we're talking about the problem. We don't need to keep being like, oh yeah, you got some big tears, your face is getting all puffy and red. Like, that's not what we want to do, right? We wouldn't do that to a friend. It's counterproductive. At that point, your friend is like, oh my gosh, like I look horrible. And now you've got them like stressed about something else that isn't even the problem. What you want to do though is call attention to the problem so that people can see, oh, this person really understands who I am and what I'm struggling with. Oh, they see me. They see that this is the thing I'm struggling with, and they've come up with a unique solution to solve this thing for me. When you can get to that place, it's a place of empathy as opposed to pushing and prodding and getting someone to feel something so that they buy. And this process is a lot longer. Your sales cycle will look a lot longer. It won't be that someone might come and get to know you today and buy today. That might happen. But usually, when you're coming from a place of empathy where you're saying, like, hey, this is the things I see that you're struggling with. I've created a unique solution for you through this process, through this class, through this offer that I have. If this sounds like the right fit, come and join me. And now it's just an invitation. Now you've let them know, hey, I see that you're struggling with this. Here's how I can solve it. And now it becomes their decision to either fix that problem, or it's not worth it to them enough to fix that problem. And then you can play with that. Then there's more things you can do with that once you figure that out. But that's how we want to talk about the problem without going to that place of showing people the most negative thing that could possibly happen if they don't solve the problem. Instead, we just want to call attention to the problem and then paint the picture of what's possible for them and say, like, hey, this is what you're struggling with, but I want you to know this is possible. Like, you can be in this place instead of this place. And when you show people that contrast, it shows them that they're not where they want to be. And that's where people can see, oh, I do have something that needs to be solved. And then they go and they are willing to either pay for that to solve that problem, or they're not. And then that's something obviously to look into. If you are calling it out and people aren't purchasing, then it's like, okay, why is that? Am I not addressing the real problem? What's going on? And then you can dig into that. But that is how we want to talk about problems. And I think that that's a much more empathetic approach, an approach that allows people to make conscious choices about what they're buying instead of pushing them. And then you never feel like you are this salesy person who's like trying to get people to purchase and you're trying to convince them. I never want to convince anyone of anything. I already know that you have this problem. and I'm here to help you solve it. And it's up to you to decide whether you want my help or you want to go in a different direction, which is totally fine. But I'm not going to convince you by prodding at your problems that you need me. That never creates a good dynamic. And then it's just very stressful for everyone involved. So I hope that helps answer that question, because I know it's tricky to talk about the problem without really getting to that place where, you're agitating the problem, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense, and I love your analogy of, like, how we would talk to a friend. We wouldn't poke them further and make them more uncomfortable. We would come from this place of empathy. Sarah is here live, and Sarah shared a really great question. Sarah says, "I think I'm struggling getting my message across. I teach yoga for stress relief and low back pain." So when you see this tonight, what are some of the questions that you would ask Sarah?
Yeah. So messaging is really about hitting what I think of them as three very specific areas that get people, because essentially with our message, what we want to do is we're not just trying to get a message out there just to get it out there. We're trying to get a message out there in order to get someone to make a decision, right? To get from a place of like, I don't know if I need this, to I know I need this, and this is the thing for me. So I love that you're so clear on yoga for stress relief and back pain. I love that. And so, what you want to ask yourself in terms of your message is, what are the skills and knowledge, the gaps in skill and knowledge that your audience has? So, are there things that they don't know about, like where back pain comes from, about stress? Like, are there things that they don't know that would help them make a decision, that would help them if they knew this, if you're like, if they just knew this one piece of information about back pain, if they knew what stress relief could do for them, or what stress does in their body to them every day, like they would be so keen to solve this problem, because it's like, whoa, I didn't even know that that's what stress was doing to me. I need to solve this. So what gap in skills and knowledge do they have? Come up with a list of ideas for that. And then what are the perspective shifts they need to have? So when someone has a problem, they're like going down a road, right? And they come up against something that's like blocking them. And the reason someone can't get past that roadblock on their own is because they're only looking in this one direction. They can't like see a different perspective. They can't see that, like, oh, if I just turn a little this way, I could walk around this roadblock. They can't see that. They're just like, this is the road. This is how I get there. And now I'm stuck and I don't know how to move past this thing. And so what we need to do is help them shift their perspective. So what are some thoughts that they have around, like, maybe they're like, I could never get rid of my back pain. It's just something that's been with me for years and years. Like, that's just something that's going to be there forever. Or I have a high stress job. It's just part of my job. Like, I'm just always going to be stressed out, and it is what it is. Like, that's what I have to live with. What are the thoughts that they're having that you need to help shift for them and show them that, like, no, just because you have a high stress job doesn't mean that you need to constantly be stressed. That's like, that could be mind blowing information for someone, because they're like, wait, I always thought that I just had to live like this. Now, what you've done is you've become the pivot point for your audience, essentially, where you're pivoting them from this way of thinking into like seeing a new perspective. And now they're like, oh, wait, I didn't realize that this new perspective existed. I need to get that new perspective, get the solution to this problem so that I can start thinking differently about my stress and my back pain. So that's another one. How can you shift their perspective? So, what gaps in skills and knowledge do they have? How can you shift their perspective? And then how can you show them what's possible? What is their desire? What are the things that they want to be stress free and not have back pain, right? Those are the things that they desire. What does that look like for them? Is it that they can play with their kids? Is it that they can go on long hikes without like feeling like I that's something that they really want to do, but they hold off on doing that because they can't? Is it that they can really unplug and just relax and not feel that constant like panic internally? What is it that they truly want? How did it? And then you need to paint that picture of, this is what's possible. I know that these are the things you want to do, and I want to help get you back to those things. I want to get you to that place where you're able to do these. That's all messaging is. So once you can figure out those three pieces and start incorporating that into your marketing, start incorporating that into the content you're putting out there, that's really what messaging is essentially getting people consistently sharing the same things over and over. And you'll find that there's patterns in these things, and all you have to do is share them in different ways over and over and over again until you're getting people who are like, oh, I get what she's talking about. I see what's possible. I see the problems. I see that I have some gaps in my skills and knowledge. I also realize that I've been thinking about this whole thing wrong. I think I might need to work with Sarah so that I can get this problem solved. And that's essentially what the three pillars of messaging in terms of just like getting it out there content wise that I would say, and I'm assuming that's kind of what you're looking for when you're talking about getting your message across is more content wise. Like, how do I share this offer that I have with people? This is what I help them with. Those are the three pillars that I always get my clients to get clear on, because once they do that, it really helps to get them consistent, because now you're sharing the same things over and over in a way that's actually driving results and getting people to a place cognitively where they're like, okay, I need to make a decision. Sarah's given me all the information I need. I either want the solution or I don't. And that's really where you want to get people, not because you want to push them, but because we don't want people in our audience who are indecisive. We want people who are in our audience either a yes or a no. Either way is fine. We're okay with either. Like if someone's like, nope, this isn't for me, that's okay. That's great. Like bless and release, and they can like go on their way and find someone else. But if it's a yes, you want to get people to that place, because if it's a yes, then you get to help them and you get to make that impact and you get to like help change their situation. So I hope that that's helpful. Let me know if you have more questions on that.
So Sarah said, thank you, super helpful. And as you were saying all of this tonight, I was really feeling for Sarah with this question of like, I teaching stress relief and low back pain. Yes, we know the students that come to class and they're like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. My back feels better. I feel less stressed. Like they feel it. And then when let's say your neighbor walks by one day and is like holding their back and talking about how sore their back is, it can be a weird spot to be in when you feel like you're trying to convince someone. Like, I really appreciate that you said that this is a long-term thing and that someone sees that message over and over again. This is not something where you just tell them once, yoga's the answer, and they're like, oh, sign me up. Like they have to keep hearing that yoga is the answer.
Yeah, it's such a great, like, I love that you said, your neighbor's walking by, you have a little conversation, they're holding their back, they're like, oh yeah, I think I, really hurt myself. I don't know. And what you're going to do is ask questions. You're not gonna, that's not the first thing out of your mouth isn't gonna be, oh well, yeah, I have a yoga class later this afternoon. Like if you want to join us, they're gonna be like, oh, why? Why would I can't do it. I'm in pain. Like, what's wrong with you? They're like, no, I don't want to come to that. But you're going to ask questions and you're going to say, oh, like, what were you doing? You're going to be wanting to understand more of what the problem is so that you can then tell them, oh, yeah, did you know that like lower back pain might, do this or that? And did you know that yoga could kind of help with that? Oh, I didn't realize that. That's interesting. I didn't know that that could be a thing. And now he's thinking, now he's like, oh, my perspective is being changed. I didn't realize that there was an answer to this. I thought I just had to live with this forever. And now you've created that dialogue. And that's kind of what you're doing with your content is you're just showing up every day, asking questions, answering questions, showing them that what's possible, showing them that there's an answer to this. And then it gets to a point where they're like, oh, I think I have enough information to make this decision. This does sound like this does sound, and with the advent of social media and how much we can post on there, if you're posting every day, it doesn't necessarily need to be like a year-long thing. It might just be that someone watches your content for a few weeks or a month and they're like, yeah, okay, I'm in. I'm going to get this thing and I'm going to join Sarah's class. I'm going to learn this and see if it's a solution for me. So when I say long-term thing, sometimes it is a longer-term thing. Sometimes by longer term in social media world, like a month is probably like a month. Or I know for me, my sales process is much longer, but that's because we work on with clients on bigger things. And you'll find that the higher priced something is, the longer it's going to take to get someone to that point where they're really can see the value, their problem, the solution, and understand all of those pieces enough to make that decision. So for me, usually people know, like, are following me or are in my world for around 6 months before they ever reach out and say like, okay, I've been watching. I think this is the thing for me. I have a few questions. I want to talk about it. So kind of keep that in mind. Keep that in mind as well. But yes, it's just a conversation. It's a conversation. We're not trying to like scream at people and be like, you need my thing. What we're doing is we're just getting up close and personal with people and having this conversation of saying like, oh, I don't want you to struggle with that, and I have a solution. Like, is that something that you want? Is essentially all we're doing by talking about the problem. I hope that helps reframe it from a place of feeling like we're being too negative.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. And I love how you said if that person was walking by, we're not just like, come to class tonight. This reminded me that yesterday I was talking to a friend of mine and her partner was in the background. He's like, I hurt my back. And Sarah, you might want to jot this down. There's an actual study. There's two studies that in my brain come together. 90% of people who have pelvic floor tension also have low back pain. There's like we're not sure if it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg, but there's definitely a connection there. And also there's another study that the pelvic floor holds tension when we're stressed. So those two studies combined are great talking points for those social media posts then, if you want to educate your clients about how stress and low back pain are actually very connected. And it might be like Danait said, asking the question. I love how you said ask the questions like, do you have low back pain? Do you notice that it increases at times of stress? Those
Mm-hmm.
might be your people.
Yeah.
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 And it's just getting to know people. It's great because then you get content ideas, but also you get to know the people. And you'll find that people, when you approach things from that perspective, people are so willing to chat with you and answer questions and tell you all the things. And they're going to be in your DMs sending you like a paragraph long thing explaining. And you're like, wow, okay, now I understand my audience even more. And it's great because you're coming from that place of empathy. So they're not feeling sold to, they're not feeling like, okay, this person is like trying to get me into they're just really genuinely, and you have to be genuine about it. Like you're genuinely asking, like, do you find that this happens when, and they're like, yeah, actually I do. And I find this and this and this and this. And you're going to be like, that is fabulous information. Thank you. And now you get to use that in order to communicate with people because now you know the language that they're using and how they're describing their problems. And it makes it easier for you to then communicate what it is that you're trying to say in a way that they understand. And so I think that that's great. I love that.
I also like how you brought up, when it's a bigger price item, like let's say Sarah was teaching a retreat where on low back pain and stress. I'm going to continue to use Sarah's example here. And it's a retreat and for someone who was going to sign up and like travel and pay for accommodations and go sign up for this thing, it would be very different to signing up for a one-off class with Sarah,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so
Yep.
the length of time as well. Is there anything else? Because you have talked with a lot of yoga teachers. I know that, especially in your work with Offeringtree. Is there anything that you hear over and over again with regards to their, creating their messaging, maybe on their website? Because I know you specialize in messaging and websites and branding. Or that's what I think you specialize in. Then is there anything that you can think of where you're like, oh gosh, if yoga teachers knew this, it might make things a little bit easier putting this message together?
Yes, actually, there are a couple things. But before we dive into that, I really quickly want to touch on the timing again. If you're selling a higher price thing, give enough lead time. A lot of times people come to me and they're like, I did this launch and it flopped and I feel so down, like I don't think this is going to sell and this isn't going to work out and all these things. And I'm like, okay, like what's the price of the offer? They're like, oh yeah, it's like a $5,000 thing. And I'm like, okay, and how long did you promote it for? And they're like 3 weeks. And I'm like, okay, yeah, no, that's not that's not how it works. So if it's like, a one-off like class that you're doing where you're like, okay, this thing is going to be $30, like it's going to be on a Friday evening, it's going to be like a hangout thing, and it's just like a one-off thing that I'm doing. Usually you can communicate the message of like the problem, the solution, why they need this thing within a week or two and have someone purchase that because it's not such a depending on your audience. Also understand where your audience is financially, because if they're already strapped for cash, or this is going to be a big decision, $30 might be a big deal to someone. Whereas if you have an audience who they spend that on a weekend at Target or something, or wherever, they're just like out about and they spend that without no big deal, that might be an easier jump for them to make. If it's something that's a little bit pricier, I always recommend doing like at least a 6 to 8 week lead up to when you say like, hey, the doors are open, because it gives you enough time. The reason things are sometimes like if something's priced at $5,000, let's say a retreat, for instance, you are not only creating an experience, which is a high value thing, you're also solving a problem in a higher value way sometimes, because of the nature of like what all you're including in. You're not just going to like do one thing on this retreat. There's going to be a lot of different components, and you're probably solving a lot of different problems within this retreat time that you're with people in this space. So because of that, for people to understand the value, you need to be able to explain the problem and the solution and all the components of that really well. And that takes time. And that takes time to not also make it feel like you're being salesy, and it becomes more of an invitation. And then you're not feeling icky because you didn't explain it well. People don't really know what you're talking about. They don't know why they should buy this thing, and all of those things, right? So just keep that in mind, that the bigger the thing, the higher price the thing, you want to give a lot more lead in time, where you're just solely for 6 to 8 weeks talking about the problem, the solution, the desire, all of those things leading up to your launch, because that does make a huge difference in terms of launch numbers, or just even being able to sell the thing. So yes, okay, sorry, just had to share that.
That's super important. I'm so glad that you shared that, because that's another thing that I will often either see myself leaning to do or see other yoga teachers doing. Okay. So, what are the couple of things that you've noticed as you've talked to yoga teachers?
Okay, so a couple of things I've noticed is that they're not clear enough on what it is that you do. Start with the thing you know best. If you struggle with like niching down, I know Shannon, you talk a ton about this, and you struggle with like picking one particular person to talk to, that's experiencing start with the thing that you know best. Some people want to jump in and they're like, I want to help people with all of these things. I want to do this thing and that thing, and I'm interested in that thing. And that's good and well. You can do that, but you need to work your way up to that, because what so many people forget is that I like to use math and numbers because it makes sense in my brain. And it's like, okay, it's an easy way to look at things and be logical sometimes, because sometimes our brain is not logical and likes to take us down random rabbit paths where we're like, no one is going to buy my thing if I just talk about this thing. And it's like, okay, let's take a step back. There are how many billions of people on the planet? 7 billion people on the planet. Let's just say that even like 0.0000001% of those people have this problem. Would you even be able to solve the problem for that many millions of people? No. Would you even be able to solve that problem for 10,000 people? No. So getting specific is actually a good thing, because the broader you are, the more, let's say you're like, I'm going to help people with back pain. I'm going to help women who are, are struggling, or are like, are pregnant, and I want to help them too, like prenatal, postnatal classes. I want to do this thing. I want to do. Now we have like what, 1 billion people that we're trying to help. Are we going to help those people? Are we going to find those people? No, we're really not. We're opening ourselves up to having that like really stressful situation where someone is like, I don't know what you do, so I don't know if this is for me. I'm not sure that you're the right person to solve this problem. And so then people back. And then you're frustrated and you're confused about like, oh, why aren't people buying these things? And it's because we're not getting specific enough. So pick the thing out of all of those things that you know best, that you've done the longest, that you feel the most confident in, because that confidence also translates in how much you share that message, how much you market it. If you're not really confident, you're not going to get out there, because you're going to always be doubting yourself. But if you're like, yes, prenatal, postnatal, that's my thing. I'm so good at that. I can do that in my sleep. I love it. It excites me. Start with that. And as your audience grows, then you're able to be less specific as your audience expands over time. But people like specificity, especially when you're first starting out, because it gives them confidence in giving you money. They're like, this person is very specific. They help people just like me. I feel confident in paying them. And once you're able to show and prove that, like, hey, I'm good at this, I know what I'm talking about, people are paying for this consistently, and I'm getting students, then you can start to say, like, hey, by the way, I'm going to expand into this. And guess what? Your audience is going to be excited about that. They're like, that's exactly what I've been looking for. Now that I trust you, I know you, I've paid you for things, and I like what you do. I'm going to go and do this other class with you. I'm going to go and do this other thing. So start with what you know best. And it doesn't mean that you can't have, a lot of times people feel like, oh, that means I can't do all these things, even though I'm multi passionate. I love all these things. You can do those things. Support another yoga teacher who's doing that other type of class that you like. Learn about it, study it in your free time. Use that as like a side hobby while you're very specific about what it is that you sell. Because the more specific you are about what you sell, the better the chances are that you're going to be able to expand into other avenues as time goes on. So I think that is super, super important. Um,
I just want to say tonight before you go on, this is like a huge light bulb for me listening to you talking about niching down, because the biggest problem I hit with yoga teachers when I say niche down, specialize, is my messaging is more about like, let's take all these other things away. And you're saying possibly you'll just focus on and start with the thing that you know best, and then you're not limiting the possibility of you might expand your offerings after that. That's
yeah,
exciting.
yeah. And the reason that happens is naturally over time. Like, so let's say you start off with a very small group of people that you're like, hey, I'm going to help you with, we're going to use Sarah's example, stress and low back pain, right? You're going to start working with those people. You're very specialized in this. This is what you do. You are so good at this. They're like, this is the person to go to. And that's what you want. You want people to talk about you in that way and talk to their friends and say, like, if this is what you're struggling, you need to go to Sarah. Go talk to her. Just go talk to her. She will change your life. And that's what you want. Once that happens, guess what happens? Your audience starts to ask you for more things because they're not interested in trying to find all these people in the world to help them with it. They're like, this sounds like a adjacent problem. And obviously they're not going to be like, hey, my house needs painting. No, but it's like adjacent enough that they're like, also, I'm experiencing some pain doing this, or I'm also experiencing pain with it. Like, is that something you could help me with? And then guess what? You get to expand your offerings because your audience is already asking for these things. They're saying, oh, but also, I know you helped me with this thing, but is there something you could do about, like, I would love if you did this. I would pay. And guess what? You're not even going to have to ask people to pay. They're going to tell you, I would pay if you would offer a class on XYZ. Like, I would literally pay you if you would do this. And now you get to expand your offerings without having had to start that way and dilute your message, if that makes sense. You get to start off by being very potent and specific and to the point about like what it is that you do. And over time, your audience will ask you to expand those offerings because they know, like, and trust you. And you get that opportunity over time. But that's something we get to build towards, not where we start. We can't just jump in and be like, oh yeah, I'm going to solve problems for like 17 different groups of people. That usually doesn't, actually 99% of the time that does not work. I will tell you right now.
That's so good. That's so good. Okay, I feel like I interrupted you like you were going to tell us another nugget.
Yes. Okay. So getting very specific on what it is that you do, getting very specific on your process. A lot of times, what I see is that, especially with yoga, which is a practice, right? And there is so many ways that you can do it. So many, there isn't like, it isn't a formula. There isn't like this is a step by step thing. What I notice is that people shy away from getting very specific about what is their approach. And that is a huge part of messaging. What is your approach to yoga? And I think that this is a little bit harder to do with things that are not as, like with me, I can tell people, like, hey, I have these 6 pillars that you need in order to have a solid brand. And this is the things we work through in in our work together. And so I have that very clearly defined process. And it doesn't need to be that way in terms of like how you run your class. It doesn't mean like every class needs to be exactly the same or something. But what needs to happen is that you need to, what needs to happen is that you need to have a way that you approach yoga that people can be like, oh yes, that's exactly what I need. I need that type of yoga, right? Like I need someone who approaches yoga from this perspective, and really sharing your thoughts, your beliefs, your perspective on how, you know, yoga and back pain kind of intersect. Where's that intersection for you? Why is that intersection there for you? Why did you decide to combine those? Like, well, where is that for people? That is so key in messaging, because it allows you to pull people in who who view who have the same values, who have the same doesn't always have to be the same perspective, but people who appreciate your perspective, if that makes sense. It's a little bit harder with um, it's a little bit harder to kind of um, explain that process with something like yoga. But if you have a unique approach, a way that you think about what the work that you do, you need to share that with people. Don't like hide that behind like the technicalities or, you know, the specific wording of this and that. Like, what is your approach? You know what I mean? Like, what is your thought process? How is it that you think about things? That is so key with messaging. It's so important to do that with messaging, because otherwise that takes that's like your personality, right? That's like that's the part that makes what you do uniquely you, and that's what we want to pull into our messaging. So that's something I notice people shy away from doing, is like they're like, yeah, they talk about like, oh yeah, I do yoga and I do this type of yoga, but they don't talk about like why. Like, okay, why did you pick this specific type of yoga or the specific modality that you practice, and like why is that? Talk about that and why that connects with you and why that connects to the work you do. Why is that the best way to solve the problem than this other modality? So many things there that people don't tap into, that I feel like if you did that would be such an eye opener for your audience.
I love this so much. And your question that you asked, what is your approach to yoga? Our yoga teacher audience really can dig into this. I agree. For example, one teacher might be like, when you come to my class, you're going to leave like sweating and, you know, really like you've done your cardio. And another teacher is thinking, "Oh my gosh, that's not at all my class. You're going to leave like you're going to feel like you can just kind of be really close to the floor and sleeping and it's very restorative." That's important messaging to get across. You know, also with accessible yoga. I know a lot of yoga teachers that are really working on accessibility and making it so that people feel really welcome in their spaces and getting that message across. I mean, if anyone's listening to this, that's probably kind of where they are at, because I gravitate towards how can we make yoga accessible to all bodies, all people on the planet. And this is great. And there have been yoga some controversial yoga groups that have not controversial because they did this, but they got specific on their process. They actually were like, these are the poses. You're going to do them in this order. You're going to do them in this way. Even my first yoga teacher training, there were these set kriyas. And I think you're right in that it gives some comfort to our audience. Like, okay, this is going to be what we expect. And
Yes,
we can
yes,
use this to talk
yes,
about our yoga.
yes. And when someone knows what they can expect, that builds trust. And that is a key element of being able to sell something, is being, and someone is going to love the very structured approach. Someone is going to be like, that's exactly what I need. I don't like going and people are just doing whatever they like. I can't do that. I need someone who's going to be like, every class we do this and this and this, and this is exactly what we do. Someone's going to gravitate toward that. And then someone else is going to be like, ooh, no, that does not sound like that's for me. And they're going to go in the opposite direction. But when you can get clear on what people can expect from you, what they can look forward to in a class with you, in any sort of setting with you, that really creates that trust between you and your audience. We talk about know, like, trust, and that's essentially we're trying to build all of those elements in our messaging. We're always trying to build up those three things so that we can get people to the point where they are like, yes, okay, I'm sold. I need to work with Shannon because I know her, I like her, I trust her process, I trust her beliefs, and I trust like how she's going to take me through this solution. I need to work with her. And so by talking about your process, you're creating that trust because someone is not, there's no vagueness. They're like, okay, I know that this is going to be a class for me because it's accessible. This person has talked about that. I feel comfortable with that. I trust this person. And I like that. I appreciate that approach. And that helps in making sure that people are understanding your message in the way that you want them to.
So Renee is here. Renee Claire. I feel like you must know Renee.
I
Do you?
feel I think you introduced me to her work because you mentioned how amazing she is in conversation. So hi Renee.
Renee says, agree with getting clear on your process and your beliefs. And Renee's a great example because Renee has really specialized and niche down. Correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, works on productivity for wellness entrepreneurs. And I love how Renee's saying, I'm working on this now, need to get clearer with my message. So I feel like, Renee, ask your questions here because you have definitely niched down. And I'm curious tonight, what would you be asking Renee if you know, okay, Renee specializes in helping this group of wellness entrepreneurs, so they're entrepreneurs like yoga teachers, focused, like getting clear and getting focused on their productivity, like their
Yeah.
time management. Um,
Yeah.
what would you ask her to get clear on her message?
So okay, I have so many so many questions. Okay. So my first question would be, where do you feel are the gaps in your messaging? Like what's happening? Is it that you're finding people are really excited, but then they aren't, they're like, yes, oh, I love this. This content is amazing. But then they get to the point where you're like, all right, cool. Well, you can buy this thing and I can help you. And they're not jumping to that point. Is it that people aren't even like they're like, okay, I don't understand, like I see the content but I'm like not resonating with, are they like not even getting to that point? So that would be my first question, is like, where do you feel are the gaps in your message that you're feeling like, okay, I need to get clearer on some things here? And I also would wonder, just from the audience that you've mentioned, like you work with wellness professionals on their productivity, a lot of times the problem is that we understand the problem and we understand the solution. We're coming from that place of like, this is the problem, this is the solution. So we create content a lot of times from our perspective, not from the perspective of our audience. And so I wonder, especially sometimes with messaging breakdown, what's happening is that you are creating solution aware content, which basically means someone is aware that they have a problem, they're aware of all the options that they have to solve this problem, and so you're talking to people from that perspective where they might not even be fully aware of the problem. And so your audience is just like lost and confused, and you're not getting a lot of conversions and sales because you're talking from this place of like, oh yeah, this is like the solution, and breaking down the process of the solution and telling them like the 5-step process you're going to take them through to get more productive. And they're not even sure, like, I don't even know that I need this thing yet. Like, have you explained to me the problem enough for me to get to the point where I'm like, oh, okay, I fully see why be not like this, my issues with productivity are causing X, Y, and Z in my business, why they're causing X, Y, and Z in my day to day. Okay, this is something I think I need to solve. Sometimes we don't get people to that point where they fully understand the problem and they're ready to take on the solution and absorb that information about the solution. We sometimes just create content from the place of like, oh yeah, here you go. Like, here's the solution. Here's this 5-step process. Like, get in on my course. And they're like, I don't think I need that. Like, I feel like I'm fine as it is. Like, yes, all of my disorganized folders, they make sense to me. So I don't need to solve them. And you need to take a step back and say, okay, why is it that we don't want a bunch of disorganized folders, even though you understand what those what those folders are? Why is it, once we can get like nitty gritty and break that down, sometimes the messaging makes more sense for people because they're now ready to see like, okay, I actually do need this. And so that's another thing I would, is like, okay, is there a breakdown there? But yeah, those would be my first couple questions right
Those
off
are
the bat.
so good. And Renee is saying, LOL, yes, educating on the problem. That's where I get stuck. Um, and I want to check. Renee's saying I had the same issue when teaching online yoga. And Sarah is saying, thank you so much for all the wonderful information. I'm realizing that I need to get clear on my own beliefs and niching down. I have to leave early, but I'm looking forward to come back and watch the rest of the replay. And if you're here for the replay, pop your questions in the comments. We can continue to work on this as well. Tonight, I'm not sure if you're in our Facebook group, but I can
Yeah.
definitely get tonight to. Are you in there?
Yeah, I am, and I'll come back
Good.
in and I think I'll come back in and I'll check on the questions. So feel free to leave all your questions, and I'll answer them in the comments if you're watching the replay too.
Yeah. And Renee is saying gaps. My offerings are pretty dry and corporate, so I need to clarify and rename sometimes.
Yeah,
I'm thinking just of one example with Renee's, and that is it's because it's a personal struggle. And Renee and I are friends, and I will tell her, like, one thing that I struggle with is my email inbox, like getting that organized. If you could talk more about time management. And so maybe,
so
I
yeah,
don't know, like maybe how would you break that down if you were
yeah.
chatting with Renee?
So again, my thing it would be the same advice that I gave to Sarah is really break down the three pillars that I talked about, because a lot of times we're coming from, again, from our perspective and our language and how we would describe things, and people are like, what does that even mean? I don't even know what you're talking about. But if you switched up the language just a little bit, they're like, oh yeah, oh that's what you're talking about. Yes, I do struggle with that. Like, okay. And you know how sometimes when someone's like saying jargon or words that you don't understand, and then you're like, what does that mean? And then they tell you, and you're like, oh, why couldn't you have just said that? Like, I get that. Yes, that's exactly, that's kind of what happens sometimes. So I would say, what are the gaps in skills and knowledge that they have around productivity? So, really thinking through, okay, is it that they don't know how to use certain software and tools? Is it that they are not using certain software and tools and they're just using, like a spreadsheet or a notebook? And you're like, no, that is not the way to do this. Like, we need to. So, like, what are the things that they don't know that they don't know? They're like, okay, I didn't even know that there was something that could, pause my inbox, or I didn't even know that there was a way that I could organize things in my inbox. Like, I didn't know that these things existed. So those are more, and that is really like how-to content. So great for reels, great for like little tutorial videos. So that's like how-to type of content. Then the one that is probably going to be a bigger task is that point of view, like shifting their perspective. What are things that they think about productivity? What are things that they believe about productivity that you kind of need to break down so that they can kind of start seeing a new path to the thing that they want? Like, okay, maybe there are people who are like, I'm a creative. I don't need any tool. Like, I just like to go with the flow, and I like to do whatever comes my way every day. And maybe you need to break down like why that's holding them back from actually like what, because sometimes people don't realize that that is also causing some of the stress that they're feeling, or they're feeling disorganized, but they don't realize that thinking that like not organizing things is causing that disorganization. Like, what are the things that you find a lot of times that there's a mismatch in the thing that they want, but the way that they're thinking about the thing that they want, like there's always that mismatch. So really, that's the perspective shifting that I'm talking about. So really thinking about what are their thoughts, what are some of their beliefs, what are their fears around this, and really digging into that. Um, and so that's going to be more of your, live videos that you might do, or that's going to be like longer, caption type posts, or even some like some media or content that really gets people to say, hadn't thought about that. Now I'm thinking about this differently. And then really talking about their desires. What is it that they truly want? And sometimes for us, it's like we're thinking the technical thing. So you might be thinking like an organized inbox. But if you're really honest, Shannon, it's you don't want to feel that anxiety. You want to be able to leave your inbox alone and just like shut off for the weekend and not feel that stress of like, do I need to email people back? Did I forget something? Like that constant nagging. That's really what your problem is. Your inbox is the manifestation of those like feelings. It's like that's what causes these deeper feelings. So then you need to like address that. Like, do you want to turn off your laptop on Friday at 5 p.m. and leave your office and feel okay until Monday when you come back in the office that like nothing, nobody needs you, you haven't forgotten anything, and you can truly rest and relax. Like I have an anxiety, I'm feeling anxiety just talking about that because I'm like, could I do that? No. I'm like, I need to check, make sure that I didn't forget things over the weekend. That is how you're tapping into like, but that is my desire. I do want to just be like, yep, don't have to check anything, and I'm cool. I'm gonna go hang out and Shannon, probably your garden, like go hang out there, or I'm gonna go take a long walk with my dog, like whatever that is. And you need to show them that that's possible and say, hey, that's your desire. These are the things you're feeling. I can really help you get there. And this is how. And that piece is sometimes missing for people as we're talking about some of the top level stuff. Like, yeah, we want the how to, but of like, how can I organize my inbox? But really, what's driving those feelings and why do I have those? Because I have this desire to not feel that way anymore. And you need to talk about those in tandem with what it is that you do. I hope that helps and makes sense. Let me know if
So
it doesn't.
helpful. Renee is saying this is terrific. Thank you, Danait. I've got the desire down, but the other areas are where the disconnect is. Excited to watch the replay of this and check out your offerings. I want to talk about your offerings tonight. Tell us how, like, where can we get in touch with you and find out more? And what are your offerings?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. I'm always hanging out there, Danait BG, and also my website, theasmaraAgency.com. Right now, I work with clients one-on-one, whether that is through really honing in on their messaging, things like this, really getting clear on the problem they solve, the offer that they have, and then how can we talk about that in the most effective way possible to get people to that buying decision. And so a lot of my work is currently one-on-one, but I am working on a program. Shannon knows this. Because I harass her about it in my Voxer in our Voxer chats all the time. That is coming together slowly but surely on doing this very specific thing, helping you get clear on one specific offer, a problem, one specific problem, an outcome that you can create for people, and then creating a message and a launch plan that actually will get you results. And so I'm working on that and hope to have it launched this summer, which will be so exciting. And that will be more of a group program type of thing where we can kind of get into a community of people and and work together to solve some of these things that I see business owners struggling with a ton. So
Well, let me just clarify. Danait does not harass me about it at all. I just get excited every time she talks about a different part of her program. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And that's really what spurred me to invite you to come and chat with us, because I said you were talking about like messaging and the problem, and I pick your brain a lot. I'm so grateful that you took this example and all of your knowledge and shared with us an example, Sarah's example of the yoga and Renee's example of being a productivity coach, because it's sometimes easier to see it outside of the career path that you have. Like for yoga teachers here, it might be easier for them to see, oh, that's what it's like for someone else. And it's work that we're all doing in our businesses. So
yes,
thank you so
yes.
much for sharing all of this today.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And one last thing I will say is that messaging is something that is always evolving. And I, I, people always want to like have one and done. They're like, got it, done, good to go forever. And that's not really what happens. It will always shift and evolve. And so if you're always feeling like every few months or every year that you're getting into like this uncomfortable place with like, oh, I need to get clear with my message, that's a good thing. It means that your business is evolving, that you're understanding your audience more, that you're understanding how it is that you like to work, and you're understanding your craft even more. And the more you understand that, the more things get refined, the more things get better, and the more that you become like the person to solve the solution, because you're constantly in that place of like, okay, what's the message? How can I refine? How can I get better? How can I do this? And so it is something that's always evolving. So don't feel like, oh, now I got to go work on this again, or feel that way. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to be in that headspace, because it means that you're working on creating the best solution possible for the people that you want to serve. And that creates a really great impact when we're able to ask ourselves those questions over and over of like, am I solving the true problem? Am I doing this in the best way possible? Am I doing it in the most impactful way possible? So just want to leave you all with that encouragement because I know sometimes it can be discouraging with the like, dang it, now I got to go back, work on this again. But it's
I
a good
so
thing.
appreciate that. And we can just come back and have a listen to the replay of this as well. I just want to highlight some of the things that we talked about. We don't need to poke at the problem to solve it. I love that. You covered why it's important to talk about the problem, that we allow enough time to market our thing and invite those people, depending on the price point, and start with the thing you know best. I would love it if the people who are here watching the replay or watching the live, the next time we connect, it's kind of like me pointing out with Danait. Oh, I know what Danait does. Oh, I know what Renee does. And that's the sweet spot. We want to get really specific in our process. And I'd love to hear from you, like, what's your approach to yoga? So you can come back and update us here after you implement this as well. Thanks so much, Danait.
Thank you. Thank you so much again.